National Park Service Arrowhead logo, Glacier National Park. Glacier National Park Conservancy logo, a special thanks to our funding partners. Vernon Finley, Native America Speaks, Apgar Campground, June 24th, 2019. Park Ranger Doug stands outside and speaks to an audience. There is a lake in the background and trees blow in the wind.
Anyway, I'm going to let you listen to Vernon Finley, who is now is in its 35th season. We have a program here called Native American Speaks, and members of the various Indian groups come and talk like Vernon is going to do tonight. Now in its 35th season, this award-winning program endures as the longest-running Indigenous speaker series within the National Park Service. This program and other critical projects like it would not be possible without your donations, even though it was coming, to the Glacier National Park Conservancy. And that's the people that kind of do a lot of the special things and pay for them in this park. And Vernon Finley is a member of the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes, born and raised on the Flathead Reservation located in northwest Montana, graduate of University of Montana, Oklahoma City University, and the University of Georgia.
The camera changes to show Vernon Finley, who is sitting within the audience. He smiles as Doug speaks.
With a bachelor's degree, master's, and doctorates in education. Now that's scary. Vernon is a former chairman for the tribe. So with no further ado and baloney, I shall turn you over to Vernon.
Vernon Finley takes the microphone from Ranger Doug, then walks onto the podium. A traditional Blackfeet headdress, decorated in white and red patterns, can be seen in the background. In addition to holding a microphone, Vernon also holds a braid of sweetgrass in his other hand.
Okay, is this on okay? Can you hear me okay? All right, good. This saves my voice a little bit. Right here, okay? All right. Thank you very much for coming out this evening. You're never sure what kind of a turnout you're going to get, especially on a rainy time. But my elders that I work with always make sure that I tell you how grateful we are that you're here in the park, because this place is preserved here not because of its importance or value to us, even though it's in the heart of our Aboriginal territory. This isn't preserved because of us or its importance to us. It's preserved because you all come here and you want to keep it this way. That's what keeps it the way that it is. And so my elders always tell me, make sure that you tell them that. That's okay. It's okay. It's no bother. I like hecklers. You know, when I first started this, my son, he's 22 now, but he was not much taller than that when I first started doing these programs, and I used to bring him along, and he would be my heckler over here. So it's really good to hear that in the background. So don't feel bad about it at all. Yeah, I wanted to share with you, like I said, we're right in the heart of Kootenai country. And when, right about 1800, when an explorer by the name of David Thompson was coming west, and he was opening up trading posts, he came across the tribes on the plains. And when he got close to where present-day Edmonton, Alberta is, he came across another tribe. But before he came across them, they were called the Kootenai. He called us the Kootenays since then. But he was asking, there was not only the Blackfeet were out there, but there was also what are known as the Northern Dene. Dene is the Navajo speakers. The linguists were able to link all of the languages, the Native American languages, into family groups. Okay, so and Doug was mentioning about the Algonquian, which is the Blackfeet, but there's also a family of Dene speakers. It's the Navajo speakers. The Northern Dene were further north into Canada, up by where they were, and David Thompson was asking them, who is the tribe that's further west? He wanted to continue moving across and opening as many trading posts as he could, and so he was asking them, who are those people? And so in the Dene language, he told them, those are Kootenays. And in the Dene language, Kootenai means the river people. And in our language, it doesn't mean anything. Which is, you know, which is very much the story that happened to almost every tribe. You know, like he was saying, the Flatheads. Who were the Flatheads? Well, Lewis and Clark, when they were coming west, they came across, you know, they was asking the tribes, okay, who are those tribes further to the west? And they assumed that it was this tribe that had flattened their heads like he described, but it wasn't them. But so he labeled them the Flatheads. And if you're familiar with the town that's right near here, Kalispell, there's also a tribe that they call the Kalispels. And the Kalispel tribe are also the same, they're a Salish speaking tribe, and they're also the tribe that is, also they called them the Pend d'Oreille. They called them Pend d'Oreille because in the Americanized or French language, you know, Pend d'Oreille kind of translates to ear pendant, or, you know, so they wore earrings, and so they called them the Pend d'Oreille. What they called themselves was Clispe, and that became mispronounced to be Kalispel. And so, you know, and it happened to almost every tribe. It's a mispronunciation or a misunderstanding of what they called themselves or who they were really about. And so we're Kootenays, according to the Northern Dene. So, but I wanted to share with you this evening a story about, I was presented with a braid of sweetgrass, and it reminded me of a story that I thought I would share with you this evening. There were, oh, and by the way, I'm flanked by the backrests, traditional backrests of, and I can tell from the design of them and the make of them that they are from the Blackfeet. The Blackfeet tribe are those that he spoke of that are across on the other side of the mountains. Now, when you listen, if you go to one of these presentations and you listen to a Blackfeet speaker, he's going to tell you about how they have been in this area forever. Well, you know, be polite and smile and nod, and I'll tell you really how it is. He said the reason why they're Algonquian speakers, why their language is connected, is because they were pushed this way from the east, you know. However, the Kootenai language is a language isolate, which means, according to linguists, they haven't been able to link it with any of the families of languages that are around, and so it's a family of its own. So now my story of that, my part of that is to say that is the best proof that I have that we actually are the original inhabitants of this area, because for as long as languages have been spoken, the Kootenays have only been here. The Salish, you can link them with other tribes out to the coast and up the coast. The Blackfeet, you can link them east. You can link the Dene further south. You can link all the other languages with everywhere else. The Kootenai has only always been right here. So we're the original inhabitants of this area. Now, and I appreciate that I have these two Blackfeet guardians standing behind me here, kind of checking to see if I'm going to lie to you. So I'll tell you the truth. A few hundred years ago, there were these warriors, these two warriors. You know, whenever there used to be battles or wars amongst tribes, there was a lot of taunting and a lot of other teasing and everything, not very much killing, until Europeans introduced scalping and burning at the stake and things like that. Then it got pretty vicious. But the Blackfeet picked up some of those habits, which was to burn people at the stake. So it became kind of prized to go over and to raid a Blackfeet camp and steal their horses, and so that was what they would do. Now, when you're going into a battle, historically, the greatest war party wasn't 1,000 strong warriors. The greatest war party was 2. Because in the traditional way, you are never to brag. You are never to tell anyone about your own deeds. But you can always tell about your friend. You can say, my friend is so brave. He went right into the middle of the Blackfeet camp and he stole the buffalo runner, the horse from the chief who was right in the middle of the Blackfeet camp. He stole. That's how brave my friend is. But you could never tell about your own. So that's why the greatest war party was 2. Because if one of you was killed, no one would ever know. And that's a statement saying, me and my friend, are so powerful. We're going to come into your camp and we're going to raid you, and we're going to take your horses and maybe your women, and we're going to return safely. That's how strong our medicine is. That's how powerful our medicine is. And so that's the kind of that was the kind of thing. So there was 2 such warriors that 2 of the Kootenai warriors decided they was going to go over the mountains and they was going to go, and they knew that the Blackfeet had the fastest and the best buffalo runners. And so they knew where they kept them. The other horses would be in a pen or be in an area close to camp. But the best horses, the best buffalo runners, they would keep them staked out right outside their teepee. And so they knew that the Blackfeet chiefs, always their teepee was always in the middle of the camp. And so these 2 decided they would go over and they would raid the Blackfeet. Then they would take their horses. They would take the horses and go further out onto the plains, hunt buffalo, gather as much buffalo as they could, and then return later in the year. So this was a few month excursion that they was going to be on. So they did just that. They went over the mountains. They came across the Blackfeet camp. They went in. They stole the chief's buffalo runner, was tied to his, was right in the middle of the camp. When they left the camp, they took some of the other horses that were out near the camp with them to haul the rest of the buffalo meat. And they headed out onto the plains, further out onto the plains. The Blackfeet, once they realized what had happened, they decided to go look for them. They was going to go hunt them down. They knew from the signs that it was the Kootenays. They were Kootenays that did it. They knew where the Kootenays were on this side of the mountains. So they started to search for them. They searched for them coming this way. And they couldn't find them, of course, because they were heading further out onto the plains. They went out onto the plains. They came to this place where there was a stream. There was some hills there, the mountains, and they could smell. There was tall grass there where they could hobble their horses. The horses they had stolen, and the horses wouldn't wander far, and they could spend the night there. So they said, "Here's tall grass. Here we can make a nest and sleep here." They were careful not to build fires, because then the fire would, they would give themselves away from where they were at. So they camped there, and there was the tall grass that they could smell it all around. They made themselves nests right next to the river there, right next to the stream, and they fell asleep. In the middle of the night, one of them could hear a song being sung, and was wondering, and asked, "Who is that? Who is that singing that song?" And the spirit told them, "I'm your mother's hair. I'm all around you here, and I'm here to help you. I want to tell you how I'm going to help you. In the morning, when you wake up, go over next to the stream, and you'll see the strands of your mother's hair. Count out 7 strands and hold it together. That will be for you, for your health. Right next to it, count out 7 more, and that'll be for food, for your food. And right next to that, count out 7 more, and that'll be for akliit, which is like material things to make life easier, warm blankets, etc. Those 3 things you hold together, you put them all together, that's for you. That's so that you will always have good health, plenty of food, and warm blankets. Right next to that group, you count out 7 more, and that'll be for the health for your family. And 7 more, count out that, and that will be for your family's food. And count out 7 more, and that'll be for the warm blankets for your family. And right next to those 2 groups, you do it again. You count out 7 more, and that'll be for your people, for your people's health, and for your people's food, and for your people's warm blankets. And you take these 3 groups. You take the group that's for you, and you fold it across the one that's for your family. And you take the one for your family and fold it across the one that's for your people. And take the one for your people and fold it across the one that's for you. And you continue this in this manner. And when you get all the way up to the top, you tie it together with itself. And you don't cut it. You pull it from the ground. And when you do that, I will have more to tell you at that time. And so when he woke up in the morning, he told his friend about his dream, and he says, this was my dream. The grass was speaking to me and taught me this song, and told me this is what I'm supposed to do. And his friend said, "Well, we better do it then." So they went over next to the stream, and they started, and they did as they was told, and they counted out the appropriate numbers. And when they started to braid it, the grass spoke to them, started to speak to them and told them, when I was this young, the earth, nothing was here on the earth but as spirits. And everything that we was all to choose what it was that we was going to become, how we was going to help or hinder the survival of human beings who were to come later. And as he folded it over, told him more of the story and said, and when I was this age, this is what we all became. Everything that you see in reality, all of the spirits chose what they are to become. And that's what they decided to do. And as he folded it, the grass was telling him the story of the history of the earth, the history of everything that we see as reality, that we can perceive. And as it went and continued on, told him the stories about everything that was around, everything that, how it lived, its relationship with one another, its connections with one another, and how it was all to be, how it was all related. And the stories about all of the relationships that happened since then. Now there's another era of time that I'm giving you the Reader's Digest version of this story. There was another period of time in there where it was a period of time that we would call I would call the animal period, which is basically where all of the coyote stories come from, and where different tribes, there'd be raven stories, or the, all of the different tribes have the different periods or different stories to tell about it, but it's basically the same kind of eras that happened throughout the history of it. And so when they got to the top and he tied it, the grass told him, and this was yesterday when I came to you and told you what I would do. And here's what I want you to do now. When you pull it from the earth, don't cut it, because when you see another heckler, when you see your mother's hair getting cut, that will be a sign of great change for your mother. But when you get to it, when you pulled it up, and you want the help for health, for food, or for warm blankets, you burn it. You burn it from the end, and you take that smoke and put that smoke on you, and that smoke will go into your heart and carry whatever is in your heart, will carry it straight to the Creator. That's what the smoke will do for you. And you sing that song, and that song will be your connection with the Creator, connection back to the beginning of time, up to the present day, wherever you are. And you make one of these braids for every family, and you take it and you bring it back to them, and you teach them the song, and you teach them how to use it and what to do with it in order to receive the kind of help from your mother's hair. And so that's what they did. That's what they did. And they took it and they made a braid for each one of the families in the tribe, and then they continued on their journey, and they came across and killed a lot of buffalo. They dried the meat, they prepared the hides, they loaded up all of the horses that they had with them, and they came back through the south, which is I think Lewis and Clark called it the Hellgate Canyon, but it's right where Missoula is. They came back through that way and then came back north and brought the sweet grass to the people and and taught them about it and how to use it. Now, in the 1970s, they started a culture committee. The two culture committees on our reservation, one for the Salish and one for the Kootenai. And when they started them, they started to interview a lot of the elders at that time about a lot of the historical times. And a lot of the elders at the time, all that they could remember about this story that I just told you was that at one time there were some Kootenai warriors that went across the mountains over to a place called Kanuswukliit, which translates in English to be Red Mountain. They went across to Red Mountain and received a song there. And that's the most that those elders could remember at that time. But I had heard the story that I shared with you. I had heard that growing up. I was raised in my grandparents' home, and oftentimes we'd have visitors from other tribes from other bands of Kootenays that would come to our reservation, and they would always come and stay at our house because we didn't have many hotels or motels on the reservation at the time. And even if we did, they probably still would have come and stayed. And so they would come and stay at our house, and among them were some great storytellers. And one of them from Canada had shared that story at that time. And I thought all of my friends and relatives and everybody had heard all of the stories, and I was very fortunate because I had heard him. I heard those stories. And one of the things that came across in those stories was always, there was never told a moral to the story. You know, this is what you're supposed to get out of it. That was never told. What you got out of it is what you were supposed to get out of it. And the next time you hear the story, you get something different out of it, it's because that's what you were supposed to get out of it at that time. And through thousands of generations of living here, that has always been the way. When I was young, you know, I remember asking one of the storytellers one time, but what does it mean about a certain part of the story? And they'd always answer me with, well, what does it mean to you? And I would say, well, I think it kind of means da-da-da-da-da, you know. And I used to have these conversations, spiritual conversations with my grandfather. We shared a bedroom, he and I. And so I would always have this spiritual interpretation of the story. And so I would tell the storyteller, this is what I think it means, you know. And they would say, yeah, it must mean that. Yeah, I'm sure it means that. But they would never tell you what you were supposed to get out of it. You know, and I remember I was in one story in particular that had all of these different aspects to it that just totally amazed me. And so I was just, you know, my teacher would have been proud. I was asking these probing questions, you know, of just, you know, showing just the highest level of interest and just probing. And my grandmother was so embarrassed. She was so embarrassed about it, and the storyteller became kind of a little bit frustrated and stopped talking. And afterwards, my grandmother was so embarrassed, and she chewed me out, and she told me, don't you ever do that again. Don't you ever ask them, pry like that again. She said, it takes these elders a long time to become an elder and to learn and to know what they know. And they don't owe you any of it. And I don't ever want to see you do that again. That was the most shameful thing that you could have done. And she said, if you want to learn something, you come and you sit and you present yourself in this respectful way. And maybe, and you wait, and maybe they'll teach you something. Maybe. But they don't owe it to you. And don't you ever do that again. And so consequently, after that, I learned how each of my favorite storytellers liked their coffee. And so, and I would bring it and sit, and come and sit and wait. And eventually, after they got done with their business with my grandparents and their visiting, eventually they would turn and say, "You want to hear a story?" Yes, that's what it's about, But they were always that way about never telling you the moral. And that says a lot about the education, the education at the time. Like Doug was saying, my degrees were all in education. And so I'm very familiar with the Western view of education and what it's about. Like I was saying, my teachers would have been so proud of me of asking these probing questions. But in the traditional form of education, you hear and you experience, and what you get out of it is what you're supposed to get out of it today. And you'll get something out of it that different the next time, and that's what you're supposed to get out of it then. And all of it is right. So now, tomorrow, if somebody were to ask all of you, "So what was that story, Vernon? What did Vernon tell you last night?" How many different versions do you think there would be? But more importantly, which one would be the right one? You see, the way that the education system is that no matter what you got out of it, it's right. It's correct. And so much of the Western education is geared towards, no, we're all supposed to come to the same conclusion, and that's the right answer. Everything else that varies from it, it's wrong. And Western education is very limited in that way. Very scientific based. According to science, for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. And that's also true from traditional Kootenai perspective. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. But it doesn't limit itself from there. And how Western view of it limits itself is by saying, and we as human beings, we have to perceive the connection between action and reaction. Otherwise, the connection doesn't exist. When I was a teenager, I remember walking into the living room one time, and my grandmother was watching television. And when she was watching television, she was watching the news. And of course, you know what news is about, right? It's about one disaster or another, And so as it would go from disaster to disaster, each story, there'd be earthquake here, floods here, fires there, and each story she would just, oh my. And it'd get to the next story and she would, oh. And at one point she realized I was standing in the back there watching her, and I was sitting there thinking, I wonder what she thinks, if she thinks this is happening down the street or what, And she turned around, and when she saw me, and she turned around and she told me, "I knew they shouldn't have gone to the moon." Which is exactly what I did. I thought, she's lost it. But in traditional view, we're all Western educated. So We've been brainwashed to believe we have to see the connection between action and reaction. Otherwise, there's no connection. When they went to the moon, do we know what type of reactions they were doing? What type of reactions was going to happen as a result of that? We didn't know. We don't know that because we think there is nothing, because we've been taught and educated to believe. We don't see a connection between what we've done to the moon and anything happening here on Earth. We don't see that connection, so there is no connection. Traditional Kootenai view wasn't limited that way. Everything was within the realm of possibility, so that they knew that actions produced reactions, but wasn't limited to us in our 5 or 6 senses, as whatever you may choose to believe, that we can perceive it with our senses. So that's one of the views. That's one part of the cultural differences that I think was really prominent, really something that really needed to be paid attention to. Was, we could learn so much from traditional view as if we didn't limit ourselves in a lot of ways. Time. We limit ourselves in time. Time we think of as linear and sequential. You can never go back. This moment can never happen again. It's past. It keeps moving forward. Traditional view wasn't limited that way. One time as a little kid, I was sitting on the floor in my grandparents' home, and I looked up, and my grandfather was looking at me, and he was smiling. And he was always just stone-faced, This is him smiling. And this is him angry. That's the way he always was, But I looked up and I could see it in his eyes. He was smiling at me, and I told him, "What, Papa? What?" And he told me, one of these days you're going to travel around the world, and you're going to wonder, how did this Kootenai boy from Montana get all the way around the world? And I was looking, I thought, now my grandparents were pretty old, and we lived about 22 miles from Polson, which is, the nearest town that has a few stores in it. And so it was an all-day trip on Saturday to go to town and back, And about another 70 miles was Missoula, which was the big city. And so I used to think, wow, you mean someday I may even go to Missoula? In 1988, when I was just finished up graduating with my bachelor's degree, I was invited to be a part of the people-to-people tour of the Soviet Union, and was there with a lot of high school students, all the high school students and teachers. And I had just finished my teaching degree, and so I was able to accompany them. Our leg of the trip was through the Baltic republics, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia. Now, if you recall, 1988, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia were declaring their independence from the Soviet Union. And so there was fear that our leg of the trip might be canceled. But it wasn't. Gorbachev, and we spent 2 days in Washington, D.C., listening to the State Department people telling us what not to do when we get there. Do not ask about Afghanistan. Do not do this, do not do that, do not do this. They was worried about it. 2 days worth of State Department debriefing. We get to the Soviet Union and Gorbachev says, go where you want, do what you want, ask whatever you want, no problem. So we're going through and during the first week there, we was in Moscow. I was walking down the street in Moscow. There's a street called the Arbat, which is all street vendors. There's no vehicle traffic on it, all street vendors. So walking down the street, coming up the street, coming the other way were these two guys. One of them was wearing a coat kind of like this, black coat. Written down his sleeve was Montana. And I was like, whoa, you know, halfway around the world, here I am, I see somebody from Montana, you know, and I'm like, hey, you know, where are you from, man? Where are you from? I'm from Montana too. And these two guys kind of look at me and kind of get closer together and kind of hold on to each other a little bit, and they're kind of looking at me, and I said, no, really, where are you from? I'm from Polson. Where are you from? You know, and they're like moving back, and one of the vendors that was there was watching this, and he knew English, and he was watching, and he said, they don't understand you. They don't know what you're saying. They're Russian, and I don't think they've been out of Moscow in their whole life. And I said, but his coat says Montana. He says, yeah, American clothes are big over here. You know, he probably got it on the black market. He doesn't even know what it says. So I felt about this small. And so since he had distracted me a little bit, these two guys, I turned back and these two guys were scurrying away. And I thought, oh God, what a dumb one. How did this Indian boy from Montana think he was going to run into somebody from way over here, way around the world, halfway around the world? And it dawned on me. My grandfather was seeing me at this very moment. And what he told me as a little boy playing on the floor in the living room, he used words that would let me know, I see you. I see you in this instant. It was the exact same instant. That little boy playing on the floor was the exact same instant as this first-year teacher walking down the Arbat in Moscow, Russia. The same instant. And I looked up, and I knew he was looking at me. And I said, wow, you know. That's the view of time. It is not linear and sequential. It is, yes, but it's not limited to only that. Deja vu, completely understandable from the Kootenai worldview. How is that understandable in our Western view? Doesn't make sense, you know. So, you know, there's limitations to the Western view of things, to the Western science, to the Western views of a lot of things, but that weren't limited by the Kootenai view. So, now I told you we're right in the heart of Kootenai country. And I wanted to give you a sense of what it was about. Like up near where Edmonton, Alberta is, in 1800, David Thompson came across the first Kootenays that he had seen, that they was going to trade with. That was kind of the northeast corner of the Aboriginal territory. Down where Yellowstone Park is was kind of the southeast corner of the Aboriginal territory. Up to northern Idaho, there's a place called Lake Pend Oreille. That's kind of that boundary of the Kootenai territory, and you go north from there into British Columbia to the Columbia Lakes region. That's kind of the northwest corner. Now that area I'm describing is kind of the yearly cycle that the Kootenays wandered through throughout the year. There was awareness from the stories about the entire earth. There's a coyote story about where coyote comes to the Rock of Gibraltar. So there was knowledge of the entire earth, but this territory that I'm describing to you was the yearly cycle that the Kootenays did. And I believe the reason why that we were the original people here is because this is also the crown of the continent. Are you familiar with that term? It's called the crown of the continent because of where the water goes. You're familiar with the continental divide, where on one side of the divide all the water goes to the Pacific, on the other side all the water goes to the Atlantic. But the crown of the continent also is the place where on the east side some of the water goes down, flows all the way to the Gulf of Mexico. Other parts of it goes over across Canada into Hudson Bay. On this side over to the Pacific Ocean. This place right here, that's the crown of the continent, is where the Kootenays were placed. And that's another story. But I'll kind of end there. What I wanted to share with you though was to kind of give you a view of the Kootenai worldview, what it's about, the differences with where then between it and Western society, and also to make sure, and I started off with it, but to make sure that I let you know how much the elders appreciate you coming here, because we believe that the spirits that gave us our songs, that gave us our ceremonies, those spirits are very much alive here, very much alive everywhere here. And that those things are actually what attracts you to come here on rainy June to camp, to be a part of this. It's what actually draws you to these areas is your spirit wanting to connect with those spirits. And so, because of that, your presence here will keep this the way that it is. There are medicines, there are things that we gather throughout our Aboriginal territory that are most prevalent here in the park. And so, keeping this the way that it is really important to us. And so that's what we're most grateful about with your presence, is because the more you keep coming, the more they're going to keep this the way it is. My grandma used to always say, those opposites, they're married. And how many of you know opposites that are married to one another, right? And she said, if you see one and you don't see the other one, it's because you're not looking. They're married. They realize, look at this place where we're at, how it is. There are some trees up here on the hillside that heard my ancestors singing and doing ceremonies in this place long before anyone imagined there was such a thing as Europeans. Long before then, and they're still here. A lot of those spirits are still here. And so, but we also realize those opposites are married in order to keep it this way. It was necessary to put a strip of pavement right through the heart of it. You know, those opposites are married, because if that strip of pavement wasn't there, you know, not enough people like you would have been able to visit this place and keep the rest of it the way that it is. So thank you very much you've been very, very, very good audience this evening. And I know those benches get pretty darn hard by about this time. So thank you very much. I'll be glad to answer any questions you might have, but thank you very much for coming out this evening. You know, Ranger Doug has always been my favorite. I always enjoy his part right at the start. You know, he's been working here in the park as long as I've been alive. 21 years. Thank you very much.
Vernon Finley walks off of the podium. The screen fades to black. Text on the screen reads, presented by Vernon Finley, Doug Follett. Filmed by Hannah Schwalbe, Daniel Lombardi, Alexander Stilson. Edited by Alexander Stilson. Glacier National Park Conservancy logo, a special thanks to our funding partners. National Park Service Arrowhead logo, Glacier National Park.